I've seen lots of smart YouTubers put blankets on their new bikes, so I did too. Let's talk about it. Hey guys, Josh here again, a daily mountain bike rider, and I am super stoked because today is new bike day. And not just that, this is a bike that after riding about 10 times, I would say is one of the best bikes I've ever ridden. So let me tell you all about it, but first I should probably show you what it is. Without further ado, my new bike. Oh. In all seriousness, this is my new bike, the 2021 Ibis Ripley AF. That's right, it's not another Ripmo, but it is in fact a Ripley. And this bike really jumped out to me when it got announced just about a month ago. A couple things that jumped out. First was the all aluminum frame. I've had a lot of carbon bikes, but I really like the idea of aluminum. It's definitely a little bit heavier, but you don't have to worry about it or baby it as much. The second thing is the price point. This bike, a complete version, comes in at $3,000 for the Shimano Dior, or $29.99, and then just like $3,300 for what I bought, which was the SRAM NX GX, but I've definitely replaced a lot of parts. More than that though, the thing that really drew me in was the geometry. I'm not much of a geo spec nerd, but about 6 months ago, I picked up a 2018 Transition Smuggler. I didn't actually show it on the channel because I didn't plan to love that bike so much, but that bike blew me away. The geometry and the smaller travel made it very playful and fun, and I wanted to find that with just a couple minor updates. And of course, this is where the Ripley AF came in. So let me tell you all about the specs of what I actually put on this bike, and then I'll tell you why I love it so much. Let's work our way up from the bottom to the top. Starting with the wheel set, this is of course the FSA Gradient carbon wheels. They have a 29mm internal width. I've been running these for about 2.5 years now. Every single set that I've had has been bulletproof, has stayed very true, and I think they just look delightful. Laced to those wheels, I have Maxxis. In the front, I have the Assegai, which is in the 29x2.5, and in the rear, I'm trying a new tire, which is the Aggressor. The Aggressor is better for like harder packs, something like a California style dry temperatures, but I find it very fast rolling, and actually, I've really enjoyed it here on trails in Bellingham. Moving up to the brakes, this came with Guide Rs or G2Rs, so Guide 2s, and I tried those out for the first 10 rides, and all I have to say is, I was terrified. I mean, seriously, I couldn't really brake, which made me go much faster. So I got like PRs on Strava, but no one cares about Strava. Stop using Strava. So now I have the Shimano Dior 4 pistons. These are exactly like my XT 4 pistons. They just have a few less bells and whistles, and of course they don't have a reach adjustment. But if you have a 1-up EDC light tool like I have, then it's easy to make those on the fly. Up from there, let's talk about the drivetrain. I've got, of course, the Advent X. If you haven't heard me talk about the Advent X before, it's a 10-speed drivetrain. It gets you an 11 to 48, which is all that I really need. These have worked very well for me. Every now and then, the shifting gets a little finicky, but with a couple minor tweaks, it gets back in line. Connected to the drivetrain up front, I have the FSA SLK carbon crank. Again, I've used many of these cranks and they have been very good for me. And of course, I've got my FSA bottom bracket. Moving up to the suspension, in the frame, we have the Fox DPS. This is definitely a smaller eye-to-eye length shock. This one is actually set up for a light tune, which I am not a light person, but overall, set up for my body size, it's worked decently well. In the front, I replaced the stock Fox 34 fork that had 130mm of travel, and now I have this Fox 36 fork that has 140mm. It's a little over forked. This is the same fork that I ran on my Smuggler, and having a little beefier fork for my style of riding, which is basically doing everything you probably shouldn't do on this arguably cross-country bike, that has helped me out a lot. Continuing up to our dropper post, of course, I have the FSA Flowtron. This is a 150mm, which as you can see, definitely has a lot of posts sticking out from the frame. I'm gonna throw in a 175, but just haven't done that quite yet. Up to the handlebars, of course, I have the beautiful Oil Slick FSA Gradient stem, which you can actually buy now on their website. Be sure to use the code MTBDaily or DailyMTB or whatever is down below to get a discount on that. And I've got my FSA Gradient bars. This is just a 20mm rise and 800mm wide. Topping things off, I've got my grips, which are the ODI Elite grips. These have always been bulletproof with me. I've got that 1-up EDC light tool, which I've been putting on all my bikes because they really are so handy to have. And last but not least, I'm trying out the WTB Silverado. I've been on a spree to find the perfect saddle. I haven't found it yet, but I really do like the WTB saddles. So that about wraps up everything I've put on this bike. But before I tell you about what I love and don't love about this bike, let me address some elephants in the room. Number one, people are gonna ask, am I sponsored by Ibis or did I get this bike on a discount? And the answer to both those questions is a big old no. I paid full price for this bike, which was the $1,300 plus tax. Here's my receipt right here from my local bike shop that holds Ibis, and that's Fanatic. And I thought this bike was worth it to buy in full price, and I didn't want my opinion to be in any way jaded by a sponsorship or a discount. Not that Ibis would give me one, so I paid the full price for it. Number two, people are gonna say, how can you review this bike when you upgraded it with all the parts that you ride for? Well, I do have to upgrade the parts for my sponsors, FSA, who make really good products, but more than that, the beefier fork and the different brakes are just things that I know I like. I could ride this bike in stock form, and I'm guessing I would still like it, but I know the things that I've done are gonna make me enjoy it a little more. So let me tell you about the huge things I love about this bike and a couple of glaring weaknesses that I really don't like. First, I love how playful this bike is. A lot of people will say 120 millimeters in the rear and 140 millimeters up front is not enough travel, and I think you're just wrong. For any of you who've been riding a 150, a 160, and now 170 and 80 millimeter travel bikes, I'm telling you, go back to a little bit less travel, and you're gonna notice that you have a lot more playful and poppy feel just going on your normal trails like I have here in Galbraith and Bellingham. But overall, I have never felt like I've been in a situation where if I had 40 or 20 more millimeters of travel, I would be more confident in my abilities or safer. So overall, this bike is just super fun and playful. The next thing I love about this bike is how well it climbs. I made a video a while ago when the Ripmo first came out, and that bike had a lot of hype around it, so I think my expectations for it were far too high. But the one thing it did do very well was climb, and this Ripley climbs extremely well. The DW link on this, the rear suspension, is very, very effective in climbing. Being a little bit of a bigger guy, I hit the lockout switch almost every time I go for a long sustained climb. This is seriously the first bike where I don't need to use it. Now, I still do because I think it's much more effective and saves you more energy. But overall, I find that I can go on longer rides and feel much more fresh because of the less travel and the very effective rear suspension. And the last thing I would say that I love about this bike is kind of hard to put my finger on, but the suspension feels limitless. Sometimes I've ridden longer travel bikes where you feel like you find the bottom out point of the suspension, no matter how much PSI you put in the rear shock. But on this bike, even at the 120 and even with the light tune that this rear shock is, I feel like I can just hit something super hard, like a big drop, like here I totally bottomed out my suspension, and yet the bike doesn't feel harsh or like I'm having a bad time on it. Everything I throw at this thing, it just brings a smile to my face, and whatever you want to call that, that's why I love it so much. Now, there are a couple of small things I do not like about this bike. Number one, I think the stock build with the SRAM NX GX drivetrain is pretty good, but the Guide 2 or the G2Rs that came on here were just garbage. I took those things off after 10 rides. I really tried to like them. It's not that SRAM makes bad brakes. They make really good brakes, but the Rs on almost all their brakes are just not very good. The other thing I really hate about this bike is the cable routing. For some reason, they decided to put internal cable routing just in the down tube for like a whopping 2.5 feet, and I feel like that is just pointless. Then you see this mess of cables as they pop out the down tube going into the rear, and so for the dropper post and the brake and the shifter, you have to go under the water bottle mount, which stretches them further than when they build the bike. I think it looks bad. It's a pain in the butt when you put a water bottle or a bottle cage in there. It took me like 30 minutes to put a bottle cage on. It normally takes me like 29.5, but this made it very, very difficult. Seriously, it was not good. No, you're good. That was another Ibis, but that was a lame one because that was the old Ripley and those suck. Dude, that would actually be kind of funny to put in. Honestly though, besides those two very, very small things that are easily fixable by getting new brakes or just dealing with the cable routing, this bike has been phenomenal. I cannot find anything else I don't like about it. I'm gonna keep riding it though for the next couple months, and I have a feeling I'm gonna keep this bike for a very long time because it just brings a smile to my face unlike any other bike that I've tried before. All right, I think that about wraps it up on this bike review. If you guys have any questions, please let me know down below in the comments. I'll try to get to them. Or if you've ridden the new Ripley AF and have some thoughts about it, let me know. I'd love to hear them. All right, you know what time it is. Don't spend too much time watching a guy drop his new bike out here in the woods, but get out there, ride your bike, and make sure you do it every day.